whenever you win, you know I'm wishing you'd lose. So you know I love you. I almost forgot. Oh, please, at my age, I forget everything, but I did not forget that this is a very special moment, a very special occasion, because today, the day after Purim, I have the honor, I have the joy of talking to a brilliant songwriter and musician, and it's a very sweet task I have, in fact, because he is Matthew Sweet. This is the author of such songs as What Do You Know, The Ugly Truth, Wind in the Sun, Come to Love, Come to California. He has a new album out, and it is called Catspaw, and it is really, really good. And it's even better to have Matthew Sweet with us on the phone. Shalom, Matthew. Hello.
Shalom. How's it going?
Oh, thank God. You know, prostate trouble, the usual. How are you?
Me too.
Oh, for real? Are you okay with your plumbing down there?
Well, you know, I do what I can.
Now, you are coming to us all the way from Nebraska, and Dave, the host of the show, he was talking before. It's like, oh, you know, these famous big, great musicians, they have these houses in L.A. or they're in New York somewhere. Why did you go back to Nebraska?
Well, my wife and I lived in Los Angeles for about 20 years, and we were just kind of ready to not be in as huge a city as Los Angeles was. As much as, you know, we loved California and our friends there, both of us came from Nebraska. All our families are here. And we thought about going all kinds of different places. But we thought it'd be good to go here just because we sort of knew people and it'd be easy to see our families. So we sold our cool house in Nichols Canyon up above West Hollywood, and we got a place here in Omaha. I grew up in Lincoln, which is about 40 miles away, and Lisa grew up in Scottsbluff, which is kind of the other end of the state. And, Omaha made sense because it was a little bigger city and, it has kind of the main airport in the state. And it was a little easier for me to start tours from here or go to either coast. And the flights were much shorter than, going east from Los Angeles. So we just had various reasons, and then we kind of learned when we moved some stuff we've been missing, like, the changing of the seasons, which is really, I love that. I grew up with it, and to see, this beautiful fall, and then the snow, and the spring is incredible. The summers are pretty hot, but, we get through it. But it just seemed like time for a little bit of a change, and it's been really great, actually.
Yeah. Omaha is the Newark of the Midwest. It's a lovely kind of a thing. It's a beautiful, there's a little. Is your writing, or is your songwriting influenced by the seasons? Do you have a different feel, or are you inspired by them at all in your actual writing?
I think so. Just anything that makes me feel sort of the cycle of life more. I'm not a super religious person, but my feeling is more that kind of nature, is God. And so to be able to experience that and, feel the years going by in a little bit different way, I think it does give me, I just feel a little more in contact with the passing of time, a little more just aware of things coming and going. And so for me, I think it makes sense. I'm a pretty kind of a homebody. I don't tend to go to parties or have a lot of friends, and my wife is kind of the same way. We're comfortable kind of being on our own, and so with today's world, with the internet, we still feel connected to everywhere and everyone. It kind of affords us the ability to be any place we want to be, and I think that wouldn't, without the internet, it would have been harder, but it kind of doesn't matter where I am these days in terms of my being able to interact and do the parts of my job where I have to have contact with the world.
Well, I have to say, I totally understand. I don't have any friends either, mainly because I'm an asshole. That's my reason. But I get it. But you can do it. In fact, one of the things is, I don't know if this was a decision made before the pandemic or during, but Catspaw, you play nearly all the instruments on it, not just guitar and vocal. You're kind of like almost a DIY one-man band. When did that decision come about?
Well, I mean, it's really mostly, because maybe a couple of years ago I started thinking about playing lead guitar myself, making an album and seeing what that would be like. I don't usually play lead. I'm sort of known for a bunch of different great lead players playing with me. But I sort of felt like, at my age, I'm 56, that it'd be fun to kind of give it a shot and see sort of what I felt. And I think because I'm the songwriter and I have sort of the melodies in my head in advance, there's a certain way I kind of hear the scales and the music, in a song. And so I do have a feel for like notes that please me, in other instruments. And it was just a chance for me to kind of do something different. I didn't know how it would come out. I tried to keep it really spontaneous the way I would recording someone else. I didn't, overwork anything. I would kind of go for it 2 or 3 times and then sift through and pick the things I liked the most, which is really how I would record anyone. I mean, working with others these days, it's even easier because they can be, in their own apartment or home and record parts and send them to me, and I can just fly them into my sessions. So, it's easy to work with others, but I guess I was a little bit selfish about it and thought I'll give it a shot myself, and it was really fun to do. I found it kind of rewarding, and what the greatest thing is that the reaction seems to be really good, and that's something I just didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, because when you think of, the guy plays every instrument on the album, you think of like Liz Phair's girly tapes or Paul McCartney 1, 2, 5, and 7, which have good qualities to them. But you listen to your album, you really wouldn't. You think it was a whole quote unquote normalish band, and it helps that you're a hell of a guitar player. I was kind of yeah.
That's nice of you to say. Well, it's pretty basic, the album. It's really, I think I played piano on just 1 or 2 songs, and everything else is just guitar and lead guitar and bass and drums. My dear friend Rick Mink, who's played with me forever, and he's, a great friend, really almost like a brother. He lives in Minneapolis now, so he came and played the drums, but yeah, I did the rest myself, and I kind of kept it simple. So it's kind of a simple rock record, and it, in a way, I felt like it kind of is well glued together. Like it kind of, even because of that instrumentation sort of being the same, it had a kind of a wholeness about it that's a little different. I tend to try to do a wide range of things, and I might have worried a little bit whether it was all too much kind of the same, but then as I've done lots of interviews for it and gone back and listened to what the songs are about and the different songs, I realized it still kind of has it hits all the bases that I would usually hit. The songs are about life. At my age, they're about growing older and dealing with your fears and your hopes, and being snowed under by difficulties, having hope, having a feeling of defiance. You know, there's a song called Challenge the Gods where it's about, you know, fighting against the forces that work against you in life. And so in that sense, I think it's kind of like all my music, but it just made it a little different to approach it in a little more solitary way.
Yeah. That is a great song. That, you know, do what you want to do, challenge the gods to act. It's like, okay, come on, take me on. That's it. I love that. It's very. So many of the songs are so catchy too. What? Sorry.
Well, we have a guy who's played with me live a lot last few years. His name is Jason Victor, and he's kind of a little bit younger than the rest of us and a little bit of a hot shot. He lives in New York, and he's kind of sought after by a lot of different people to play with them. And so we kind of joke with him, and we were, you know, out on the road, and I was joking with him, and I said, you know, you just owe the hubris. And then I thought, you know, while I was talking to him, I looked up the definition of hubris, and one of the things it said was to challenge the gods. And so that kind of it struck me as a good title. So I really only had just that phrase as a title, and I kind of married it to the music that made that song. So it kind of came out of a little humor being shared with a good friend guitar player.
Well, I mean, you've tackled the deities before. One of my favorite songs of yours, the lead track on Girlfriend, is Divine Intervention, which has that incredible guitar hook. But it's also about, you know, I do not understand, I don't understand, I'm a rabbi, I don't even understand God. But have you reconciled? Where are you at the moment in terms of your relationship with whatever is up there?
Well, you know, I think I'm very open-minded. I do really think of nature, of really the whole universe as, you know, the awesome, you know, hard to understand, you know, greatness of things. And so more and more I do think of that as kind of my religion. You know, I used to think I'm just not really religious, but I think I do believe in a spiritual connection with things. And I'm honestly pretty open-minded about, you know, I think all religions are trying to get at something that's fundamentally good. You know, it's really people that kind of, you know, mess them up. I was raised Catholic, and I think as a kid I was kind of confused by just the sort of traditions of it being a little, you know, not from my time. And so and also, I had so many things I wanted to do, especially making music. I was kind of looking for a way to, you know, skip church. And also, it was kind of rebelling against my parents. So I ended up not really having a main religion, and I kind of thought of myself as being atheist, but I sort of feel like that's limiting, even if I don't think, you know, there's a specific God that, you know, is like a man. I do find the world around me and nature and the universe to be awesome and sort of overpowering. And, you know, I think in general, I've softened over the course of my life and become more accepting of people in general and more understanding how it can actually be a really great thing to guide people into, you know, that side of life where you're thinking about something greater than yourself.
It sounds like you're in a very good, thank God, place at the moment, even despite 11 and a half months into this COVID pandemic, and the internet has been great for you to be able to continue working, but you've had issues long before the pandemic. You've talked about being bipolar and having to deal with that all those years. How have you been coping with the overall pandemic and kind of being shut in, even though you're a homebody by nature?
Yeah. I think that I am coping pretty well. it's not something I'm not used to kind of be on my own. I like to be alone, and I really kind of always have since I was a kid. But the toll on people, and the deaths of the pandemic, that really breaks my heart. And I really feel a lot of empathy going out to the people who've been directly touched by it. That's the thing I'm always looking for, people who, like, for instance, Biden has what seems like a real empathy about it. And I really respond to that, because I just think we can't miss that. As much as we might want it to be over, or some factions think it's not that big a deal, it is a really big deal, and I think it's been really hard for a lot of people. So I think it breaks my heart a little bit. My heart went out to everybody. Unlike a lot of musicians, I didn't start immediately doing lots of performing on the internet and those things. I really waited many months before I kind of started doing it, really till the beginning of this year, because I just felt like, in a way, it wasn't exactly appropriate or something to look for attention in the situation, that we were in. So, it's been really, for me, like a lot of people, it's just changed things, and it does feel more isolated. Also, I had finished my album right before the pandemic, so I'm not one of these people that, would shed it during the pandemic and made new creative effort. It was more a time, after I make an album, where I usually step back for a while and kind of try to get to a place where I feel kind of clean slate. And I was lucky enough to hook up with Omnivore Recordings so they could release the record. And it was a bright spot, in my year last year, to work on the artwork and get ready to be releasing the record this January. So I felt, really lucky to have that. But it will always kind of be my pandemic record. And it does reflect somewhat a sort of go it alone vibe. So it just weirdly kind of fits with it.
Now, here's a question about music making throughout your career. I mean, for a while you were on I think, Zoo Records and then fairly major label and MTV. But in those years after that, was it the idea of you make an album and then look for a distributor? Or do you have a distributor in line and then, okay, now I can make the album? Or, because you've still been releasing big, full, I wouldn't say lush, but regular albums every year or two or three for decades. And I'm wondering how you've been able to do that when the machinery of the music industry has changed so much.
Yeah, and it's really changed. I mean, everything changed really kind of around, I guess we can call it the turn of the century, but we mean this one instead of the 1800s to the 1900s. And it was an adjustment, but for artists, I mean, and my thing is, I love doing music. I love that the most. And when I make a record, to answer your question, I'm not really thinking about how it's going to come out or how we're going to do it that way. I think of it in terms of just really my own, it's kind of selfish, my own enjoyment of music and doing something that for me, it's a little bit like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. I don't think of it in real technical terms. It's more like kind of magic to me. When I finish making some music, I kind of can't remember where it came from. And so I get this feeling of kind of wonder every time I do it, and I think that keeps me going. And I really think I would make music even if I had no fans or no way to release it. However, in today's world, you know, you can really do it on any level and get it out there to be available even for a few people, you know. So, and I'm lucky enough I have fans who stuck through me, or sorry, stuck with me
Yeah, right.
through the years. And so, you know, they also, you know, give me hope and make me want to kind of keep going. But I always admired artists who, you know, worked right on through their lives. I could never exactly understand how you could stop, you know. And over the years, I've been asked a lot, you know, what's your advice for young musicians? And I always say you have to love doing music so much that you'll do it no matter what. Things like success and those things, they come and go. You know, you sort of have your era. I mean, there are some artists that kind of adapt to all the trends of different eras and sort of manage to stay relevant that way. For me, you know, it was never about really the performance side of it or the fame side of it. Those things were more kind of, you know, I was never a person, even as a kid, who wanted to get on stage and have everybody look at me. You know, I was much more introverted. I learned to write songs, you know, in the closet of my bedroom where nobody could hear, you know.
Well, wait, let me ask you, Matthew, what was the first song that you ever remember writing as a child or a teenager? What do you remember the first? Yeah.
You know, I really can't tell you that. I don't know. I just know I was trying to think, you know, where does it come from, you know, and I probably tried to imitate artists that I liked. I think it was around the time I started to try to write songs was probably kind of in my mid-teens, and I imagine that stuff, and it's around, you know, I have cassette mixes of stuff, but I haven't really gone back and gone through it all. But I imagine there was this time where I had been listening to a lot of kind of British punk new wave sort of artists, the more melodic people, Elvis Costello and Nick Lowe and XTC and the Buzzcocks, you know, a lot of these British groups. But when I started writing, I really wanted to find what's the American, who are the American people making independent records and that I can relate to, you know, that maybe seem more like me. And that's when I discovered, you know, the DBs and Mitch Easter and these guys from North Carolina, and then there was REM, and eventually I heard about Big Star and Alex Chilton, and so I kind of found my own, you know, John Lennon and Alex Chilton's music, and that was around the time I think that I really started writing and trying to become independent in my thinking about it. But it wasn't until I got signed to my first development deal, which was at Columbia Records. I was only, you know, 20 years old, and I went up to New York and had a meeting with these guys at CBS, and they were like, you know, we think you should be a solo artist and use your real name, you know. I think I would have been one of those people that has a band, but it's not my name, you know, but it's really me. But they kind of talked me into using my name, and that really led me to trying to find who I was, you know, to be comfortable with myself. And so I think that influence kind of helped me along a little bit. And it was really with my album Girlfriend, which is actually my third album that I made, that I felt like this is me. You know, I finally felt like it kind of clicked. And then lo and behold, it sort of clicked with other people too. So it was kind of overwhelming.
There are, by the way, there are some very good songs on the first couple of Columbia record. Easy is a really nice song. I like Wind in the Sun, but yeah, you're right. Girlfriend, there was something about that. It just popped. And speaking of, we were talking about guitar players before. How did you decide, like, on which song you would use Robert Quine, the late Robert Quine, and or Richard Lloyd, or yourself? How would you, with those two people, how would you balance it? Like, do I want them on that song or that? How'd you pick?
That's a really good question. You know, when I met them each, I wasn't searching for them specifically. It was kind of through happenstance, although I knew their work from beforehand. It was through my friend Fred Marr, who was sort of my age, and he was a drummer with Lou Reed and with the Voidoids at one point. And so he had played with Quine a lot, and he actually suggested I use Quine because of Quine's, affinity for like the Byrds and like jangly stuff, not so much his art rock kind of crazy stuff, which I also, got out of him. So he said, I know this guy, and of course I knew who he was, and Fred's like, yeah, but he's really, into the Byrds and that kind of jangly stuff. So I think when I was looking for more kind of arpeggiated stuff, I would think, maybe Quine, whereas Richard had more of a solid kind of blues rock background. He, did more fiery kind of lead stuff, whereas I think, Bob had more of a kind of some jazz history, some rockabilly, some things that, brought a little bit of different texture to his stuff. Now, he played the lead on the single Girlfriend, which is, totally rock. But he did do a lot of, pretty kind of interesting chordal kind of arpeggios. Richard Lloyd I met when I was playing with a group called the Golden Palominos. I did a tour, one of my first tour in a bus, where I played bass with them and played a couple songs off my Columbia record. And when we were finishing that tour, we had a gig for 2 nights in New York City at the Lone Star Cafe. And Anton Sear, the leader of the group, had some sort of falling out with Jody Harris, who'd been our lead player on the tour. He was great himself. And so they brought in Richard Lloyd in this rehearsal, trying to learn everything we did, in our set in like one rehearsal. And I kind of felt like, oh my God, I feel so sorry for this guy, but also, wow, he's the incredible guy from, television.
Yeah.
And he was, nice to me about my songs. He did have, a pop sensibility. He liked, melodic kinds of things. And I invited him over to a place I was subletting in New York, and we just sat at a table and sort of played through a few things together, and he was just great, and I really liked him as a person. So Richard, is a little more of a guitar hero, of a vibe, a little more, maybe a little more hubris, to go back to that term. But so I just would have, it was kind of random, but I just would sort of go, I'll give this one to, I felt like I needed to divide things evenly between them, because I loved them both, and they were both, friends of mine. So I just had it's like sequencing an album or something. You just have kind of a sixth sense about how to put things together, and I think it was the same way choosing who to play,
And where would you feel that your own guitar playing fall? Is it in between the two of them, or do you have your own certain style and influence? So how about when you pick up an axe?
I think that, it is probably a combination of those guys. I'm sure I'm influenced by the many other great guitar players who toured with me over the years. A couple of them I've, lost. I mean, Bob's gone. A friend of mine, Dennis Taylor, who played with me a lot, died last year. And a guy named Phillips, who used to play with me for many years, also passed away. So I've lost and known a lot of great guitar players. And I imagine all of them sort of, I learned by osmosis because nobody ever taught me. I never sat down any of those guys and said, show me how to play lead guitar. I would say in people's reaction, a lot of people say Richard Lloyd. I think that there's a thing about his attack when he plays that, I sort of picked up on. And, I don't have the chops really of any of those guys, but somehow I absorbed enough that I can kind of do it. I don't know if I could do it live. I think it helps a lot that I could be alone and nobody, looking at me or listening to me, and then I can sort of forget, who I am or what my abilities are and just kind of go for it.
Well, if there weren't a paycheck on the end of it, would you, after the pandemic's over, would you look forward to touring again? Or is it just something you kind of had to do and you sort of,
No, absolutely I'd look forward to it. I mean, for one thing, that's mostly how I've made my living in recent years. So in that way, it's been devastating. It's kind of like I've been out of work for a year. That's maybe why it was such a bright spot for me to have the album in the can and be able to release it, during this time. And the other thing is, really, as I've gotten older, I think also once I was treated for my bipolar disorder, which, probably was almost 20 years ago, that finally happened. And I went a lot of years, untreated, and things were really difficult for me during that time. But I found afterwards I could open up a little more. I could experience playing live where I could, enjoy the audience's reaction and feel more of a feeling between us, And so playing live became not something, I dreaded doing, but more like a special experience where, it kind of, it was kind of, a really positive thing, So my fans now, we're all so much older that the people that come to shows, they're not like college kids that just heard something on MTV and maybe aren't fully committed or not, They're all people that really, really care about the music. And to see that and to feel what the music does for others has been really satisfying for me.
Now, by the way, Matthew Sweet has reached a point in his career, and rightfully so. He's been covered. There's a tribute album called Altered Sweet. Get it? Very cute. Where people are now covering his songs. But one of the great side projects that you have had for the past several years, and I hope it continues. I don't know if it will, but through, and tell me if this is true, through Mike Myers, you musically hooked up with the lovely Susanna Hoffs of the Bangles and created some incredibly listenable, delightful cover albums of the music that you guys grew up with. Did Mike Myers really set that up or something?
Well, he didn't set that up, but I had met Sue before I met Mike, but she came to an acoustic show I was doing in Los Angeles kind of during Girlfriend. It might have been more like Altered Beast time, in the early 90s. And she brought Mike to a show of mine, and we all went out and had dinner afterwards. And, Mike was just starting to sort of develop the character for Austin Powers. And we kind of started going over and hanging out with he and his then wife, Robin, and Susanna and her husband, who, later became, very acclaimed director, Jay Roach. We would all kind of hang out. And I think Mike was working on getting Jay to direct the first Austin Powers. And that was, he had been a film teacher at UCLA up to then. So that was kind of a big change for him. And Mike had a room that was kind of a writing room for his movie stuff, but he had some drums in there and amps. And so sometimes when we went over, we'd all end up in there and kind of jam together. So really what happened is I really got to know Sue better through Mike. And then, quite a few years later, I was invited to sing at a Bangles show at that same acoustic club. It's called McCabe's. It's been there forever. And it's also an acoustic guitar store. And they have this little room that holds, like 100 people. But it's really great. And I got asked to sing a couple songs with the Bangles at one of those. And while I was there, Susanna and I were talking, and I just said, I've always really loved your voice. I'd love to do something together. I think I kind of thought maybe we'd write songs together, but it would be a Susanna Hoffs album. My interest wasn't in hearing more of myself, but in hearing her, because I always loved her voice. So she had been talking to Shout Factory, and they're the company that we made those first three, they were called Under the Covers albums. And we made a 60s, and then we made a 70s and an 80s. We even toured a little bit, which is really unusual for Susanna. But I can happily say we have been talking, and I think we're going to make a fourth one, a 90s version. Maybe sometime this year, or definitely within the next couple years. So, there are a lot of fans that like those records, and for us, it's pure fun. It's just a chance to kind of step in the shoes of people who made records that we loved, growing up. And
yeah, no, it's just, I was going to make a joke that it'd be interesting to hear you two duet on, Smells Like Teen Spirit. But then again, all apologies I do hear. I can hear you two doing that one.
Yeah. Actually, Nirvana is on our list for the 90s record. We've started making lists, and the great thing is whenever we do it, for whatever decade, we tend to pick a lot of the same things, even without knowing that the other one is picking them. So we always have a core list that kind of we both magically pick, and then we'll have, a few wild card ideas where one or the other of us will hear some song and go, wouldn't it be crazy if we attempted to do X song, And so it's been, just really, really fun to do. Our records they're really pretty true to the originals, and our voices kind of make it different. And so, we try to sort of preserve why those original records had a spirit that we cared about,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite tracks that you guys do is one of my favorite Beatles songs, And Your Bird Can Sing. The original will always be the original, but you guys do, it's just a lovely job on it. And so many of the songs are kind of like that. It's just,
and we love stuff like that. I mean, that's a great example of a song that both of us are just like, yeah, what I mean? At the same time, we would have thought that was a great choice. So, it was kind of like that 60s one, our first Under the Covers was really, that's really an era that both of us especially love. So that kind of stuff, we had a lot of fun playing. But, you go through music and there's different eras, but there's great stuff during all of them. I thought, would I care about the 80s or 90s, but the decades where I was sort of getting older, I thought, maybe it would be more difficult to do that with. But really, they're all easy because there's always kind of a great bunch of music being made, even if it's not the main, most successful stuff in the world. We, find it, and makes its way to us. And so, yeah, that's been a very satisfying project, and there's a lot of fans that like it. I get a lot of questions, will you do another one? So it's been fun. Just the last month or so, we've had a lot of talks about it, and so it's been fun to be able to say, yes, we're going to do another one.
Now, you mentioned the word wild card before. I'm going to throw a wild card question at you. Feel free to answer. If you could play or co-write or even just have dinner with one dead musician from the 1950s to the 1980s, who would it be?
That's so hard. I'm so in awe of the people that are my heroes. it's always difficult for me to imagine me put with them. It's like it would ruin it if I was there. I've been lucky enough to meet some of my heroes. You know, a person that jumps to mind is Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. His music is just so pure, and he's such a genius. But I did get to meet him and spend some time around his band and even perform with him some. And I got to have dinner with him. I went to dinner with he and his band once in Los Angeles, and he's like, "I got the prime rib. What are you having?" You know, he loved having dinner.
And he's alive, by the way. He's not dead. We should say that Brian Wilson, as far as I know,
that's correct.
alive and well.
Sorry, I forgot that requirement.
No, but even better, tell me. Yeah.
I was really more thinking about people I admire so much. But, you know, maybe John Lennon. I might be scared what sort of mood he was in. but, you know, John Lennon, I love his stuff. Alex Chilton, you know, I met while he was alive, but I never really got to know him in any sense. So maybe him. You know, there's so many people that are really great. Again, he's still alive, but I'd say Neil Young.
Who are others that you have?
Guys that are more like a solitary songwriter who really express their inner feelings.
Who are the other idols that you have played, you know, really new and had experience and anecdotes about? Who are some of the living or dead?
Well, I'm trying to think. You know, the closest I've gotten to Beatles, Susanna and I had Danny Harrison play on a track once. He came over, and that was kind of magical. You know, he really is a lot like George. You know, Mick Fleetwood, Lindsey Buckingham are people I greatly admire, and I've gotten to not only hang with both of them, but have them play on stuff of mine. You know, I think that era of Fleetwood Mac, even though I love the earlier stuff and Peter Green's guitar playing and all that, that Lindsey Stevie era of Fleetwood Mac, I just think that there's a lot of really great records, and I really regard them in a category sort of with people like the Beatles. So, you know, I've been lucky to hang out with them. You know, I've been in the studio before when we had Brian Wilson was working in another room, and he came in once on an album of mine called In Reverse, and we played him a song from it, and he jumped up at the end of it and said, "I love it. I fucking love it." And I started to explain like the chords and things, which I didn't even know what I'd done, you know.
Wow.
And we just all looked at each other after that. It was kind of a production team of my friends that worked on that record, a guy named Jim Scott, as well as Fred Marr from Girlfriend, and a dear friend, Greg Leese, who's another genius musician, well known for his pedal steel playing. And we all looked at each other just like, "Did you hear that? We were all here. We know that happened," you know. So I've gotten to have some of those really special experiences. I got to know Van Dyke Parks when he played a bunch of piano and organ and things on an album of mine at my house in Los Angeles, and we hung out a whole lot, and he's just an incredible person.
Tell me a Van Dyke Parks story, a cute anecdote, something funny he said or did or fun.
Well, it's funny because there's another person this happened with, but I had a song I was doing. The album is called Living Things that I worked on with Van Dyke. And his wife, and I guess to some extent him, were real dog people. And I'm a, you know, psychotic cat person. And I had this song called Cats versus Dogs. And so, you know, he got a real kick out of that. And we would do a lot of back and forth, especially when we would talk on the phone. He would bark and I would meow. And it's amusing also because there was another guy who played on Altered Beast a lot named Nicky Hopkins, an incredible
pianist,
British piano player. And he also made a solo album that I loved called The Tin Man Was a Dreamer. and there's a song called The Dreamer that I always was a real favorite of mine. And we got to hire Nikki for Altered Beast, and the same thing happened. Nikki loved dogs and I loved cats, and like in between takes, I would meow and he would bark. And in fact, I still have. He made me out of a paper coffee cup. He sort of made the ears with the paper handles, and he drew the face of a dog on the bottom of the cup. So it's like a little dog, you know? And so I always kept that, and I think of him. You know, he's also sadly no longer with us. So, you know, I feel he's one of the most talented people I ever met. Just an incredible musician. And so, I mean, those are some things. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more with Van Dyke. He was really kind of mentor-like with me. I was doing a thing called The Thorns at the time we met. It was with Pete Droge and a guy named Sean Mullins, who is also managed by my same manager. And we did this 3-part harmony demo at one day. And then it was actually, I think, Epic Records signed us, you know, and said, you got to, you know, make an album and have come up with a band name. And so we called ourselves The Thorns. And it was really difficult for me because I'd never I'd always been just myself, you know, doing music. And Van Dyke was really, really helpful. He made me feel a lot better about it and spent a lot of time talking to me.
Wow, that is so great to hear. By the way, it's just it interests me also that you mentioned, I didn't realize that you were such a cat person. So that was yet another level. I've heard so many explanations about the title of the new Matthew Sweet album, Catspaw, because it was a Star Trek character or a Star Trek thing, and also this idea of someone that, I think you explained this, that you get somebody else to do your dirty work for you and they are the cat's paw. I didn't realize that you were just into cats.
Yeah, I really like cats. You know, over the years I've made pottery where I would throw pots on the wheel and then kind of sculpt them into cats. One time I got an article in Cat Fancy that had my ceramic cats and my real cats. That was kind of like a pinnacle of my publicity life. But I've had cats since I was a little kid, and I always felt a real affinity for them. And, you know, nowadays I make these bronze cats that are actually, the molds are made mostly from pottery that I made in the past of cats. And they're really popular with fans. It's something really fun to do. I sell them, you know, on Etsy and under Matthew Sweet Bronze, or Bronzes, I can't remember. And so, yeah, just cats are just a big touchstone for me. And my wife and I have 3 cats right now, but we've had many over the years. And, you know, it breaks our hearts when we lose them. Sometimes I say it's harder than losing people, you know. But yeah, I'm just kind of an unabashed cat person.
Well, I'm guessing there's something in the personality of a cat where they're a bit aloof and independent, but also very graceful. I mean, what have you ever tried to puzzle out why you're so into cats, or what they have in relation to your personality?
Well, like those reasons I like that they're independent, but they all have very different personalities, and you kind of get to know them in that way like you would a human. You know, I think dogs are more like people. They're, you know, needier. They're, in a way, more interactive. You know, they kind of rely on you more. But cats are a little more mysterious. I love the kind of historical stuff with cats, you know, how they were sort of worshipped in ancient Egypt, and I like how they're thought of as, you know, the familiars of witches, and all these kind of, you know, magical qualities have been, you know, attributed to them over the centuries. And I think that is because there's a little bit of a cosmic, detached kind of thing about them where it's like they seem like they know something that we don't or something, you know. So, but they also can be very affectionate, and I tend to develop real really close relationships with my cats.
Well, I think if I had a spirit animal, it would be a diseased ferret, but that's just me. That's
I love all animals. When I was probably 7 or 8 years old, I would have said I wanted to be a zoologist or a marine biologist or something studying animals. I've always loved them. So, even though I'm a cat person, I still love dogs. I love ferrets. That's why it's working out between us.
well, we just have like a moment or two left with the very, very charming and fun and so great to talk to Matthew Sweet. But first of all, we want to remind people that he's got this great website where you can find out about not just the new album, Catspaw, which, by the way, you should buy wherever albums are, Spotify, any place you can get an album, you can get Catspaw. But check out MatthewSweet.com, MatthewSweet.com. You can go, I think you did a virtual concert on YouTube. Like, you're doing these little acoustic things too. Like,
I've started just this year on January 1st. I did my first Facebook Live streaming where I played some songs, and I've done a couple more since then. What I've started doing with the last one, which was about a week ago, is I started taking requests for songs that I kind of never play live, and I just got hundreds of requests from fans of all these different songs. So I went back last week and I learned 6 of them that are, unusual for me to play. And I'm going to do that again, I think, on a week from today, on the 6th of March, we're doing another one where it'll be another 6 songs of stuff I don't normally play. So, I've been interacting with the fans a little bit more, and it's really heartwarming to see how much they care about it. There are people from all over the world in lots of different countries, and it's, kind of a big love fest.
oh, this is so good. And it's absolutely a love fest having you here. So I have one more question for Matthew Sweet, and it is about love. When, people talk about you, it's always going to be, oh, he's the guy who wrote Girlfriend or had the Girlfriend album. But if you had to pick 1 or 2 of your songs that you love the most, I know they're all your children, but that you are proudest of, or that you would say, yes, I wrote this song, what would they be?
Well, gosh, that's so hard, and it's for the exact reason you said. They're all like my little babies. I don't like to pick one over the other, even though some of them are more stillborn than others. I like to kind of support them all. I also don't go back and listen a lot, to my records. I'm always looking to the future, and I'm thinking about whatever newest thing I'm doing. But having said that, there's a couple things. Maybe I would pick a couple songs that I just learned as things that really appeal to me. There's a song off of Altered Beast that's called Reaching Out, and I had to learn it for the stream last week, and I thought it was really kind of beautiful and sort of touching song, and the lineup on it, I just hadn't thought about it in a long time, and it was Nick Fleetwood and I and Nicky Hopkins and Robert Quine are like the band on it, and so that's a song that pops in my head just because I've been enjoying it the last couple weeks. There's a kind of a multi-part mega song called Thunderstorm that's from my album Altered Beast. I'm sorry, not Altered Beast.
In Reverse,
In
no?
Reverse.
Yeah.
It's from In Reverse, which came out in 1999. And I've had, a whole lot of people requesting that, so I'm trying hard to learn it. It has a lot of sections, and we kind of recorded it in sections and then put them together. So it's a little more difficult to learn and be able to sing as high as some of them need to go. But that's one that's kind of special, I think, upon listening to it. But there's really, there's a lot that I like. There's a song called Someone to Pull the Trigger, also from Altered Beast era, that people really love and I think is sort of deeper. I do feel I've always had a feeling for more melancholy music, even though, because I'm really melodic, I think a lot of my stuff comes off as being more upbeat. There is a little bit of that sort of undertow in things, and it tends to be those songs that touch on a feeling that, you know, could sort of make you feel like you were going to cry or something. Those really feel like something more important to me, and so I kind of lean toward those songs, and that's what Reaching Out kind of does. Thunderstorm hits on a lot of different feelings, but again, there's so many. I mean, I could easily pick all different ones that I just mentioned.
Well, as you said, they're all your kittens, if you will. They're all your...
my kittens. I've never said that. I love it. I may have to repeat that if you don't mind.
Just attribute it to me and give me 15%. That's all. I'm the Jewish agent of your quips. There you go. Ladies,
I make so much money now. You can have 15% of nothing. I'll send it your way.
Well, do you have any dates booked for like late 21 or 22? Are you? No,
we don't yet. You know, we thought spring, then we thought summer, and now it looks more like fall. I think it'll be slow to kind of come back. I may end up doing shows that are more like duo or trio shows first, you know. And probably not tours like I was usually doing, where it might be three or 4 weeks of, you know, constant dates. I think it's going to be harder to book that right away. So I think it'll come back kind of slowly, but, you know, I'm really hoping to be back out there and be playing, because it's not only a living for me, but it's also something I really enjoy doing.
And we will all enjoy the opportunity, we hope, not that far away, of being able to see Matthew Sweet live and in person. But until then, don't forget, you can watch his little mini concerts on Facebook. You can get his albums, the old ones and the new ones, and please, the new one, Catspaw. Cat like the paw. Catspaw. Find out more about it at MatthewSweet.com and get it wherever records are sold. Matthew Sweet, it has just been wonderful. A real honor.
It's been my pleasure, and you're a lot of fun. Hey.
Thank you very much. I like to think so. It's Purim. I'm still in a good mood. Give me 2 more days. I'll be back to my horrible self.
I love it. Do you know that movie where they have the movie within a movie called Home for Purim?
Yes.
I'm trying to think one of the, the guy who made A Mighty Wind and all that.
Christopher Guest.
His name.
Christopher Guest. Yeah. Oh, I remind you of Christopher Guest, who's not Jewish, but maybe Jamie Lee Curtis was. Oh, no, she's not either. Somebody in there is Jewish. I don't know.
Well, I remember Purim from that anyway.
Well, but yes, it's a joyous, happy holiday, and it has been made so much more joyful by talking to Matthew Sweet. It just remains for me to thank you again and to wish you good health, physically, psychologically, everything, and shalom to you.
Shalom to you. Thank you so much. And everybody, please be safe out there. It's not over yet, even though we wish it was.
Yes, wear a condom. And also the mask thing, but condom even more important. Have a great one, Matthew. Thank you, and shalom.
You too. Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye. Matthew Sweet, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God, was that not a sweet and delightful and wonderful conversation? Oh, I am so honored and so proud. I'm Rabbi Sol Solomon, by the way, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches. And so Dave allows me sometimes to do the interviews on his program. It's called Dave's Gone By.